I don't know if you guys like Marvel, but I've been really looking to the to lately to a lot of the MCU movies, and I think the official teaser for Thor, the Thor movie, has been released, and I have not watched it because I wanted to watch it on stream. I don't know. I think it's fun when you watch it with people. So while other people join, I think we can watch this. So let's give it a watch, man. I'm excited for this movie. I already have my tickets for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I'm gonna go to the first day of the premiere, the first how would you say it? The first movie, the first hour they're gonna have the movie at on the theaters, and I think it's gonna be sick. I don't really care about Marvel. Uh, well, maybe you can give it a try, man. It's not something. I'm not a huge fan, especially I don't read comics. But I like the movies, especially the later ones, the ones that they have been releasing lately. I think they're really good movies overall. But it's not, yeah, it's not about Marvel on its own, like the MCU and things like that. But hey, let's watch the trailer, man. Let's give it a watch. Okay.
These hands were once used for battle.
Oh shit.
Now they're but humble tools for peace. I need to figure out
Stormbreaker. He was like, okay, that's
exactly
that's weird.
who I am.
Ah, the song, "Sweet Child of Mine."
I want to choose my own path.
Oh yeah, the Guardians. Oh man. I'm glad, I just didn't knew that we were gonna see the Guardians of the Galaxy on this movie, but I think that's great. And I think we just saw Fat Thor. Thor, gosh, I love Thor. Okay, let me just, I had to pick up the volume. I watched like one Marvel movie years ago, and it was pretty boring except for the last 10 minutes. Yeah, if it was years ago, maybe it was one that's boring. There's a lot of the first ones are pretty boring.
My superheroing days are over.
Okay. Oh, whoa. Memories. Not every god. What is that? Is that like Zeus? I don't know.
Remember what I told you?
New Asgard. Oh shoot. Oh, it's Valkyrie, and she has to deal with like the political.
Not me. What? Just listening.
Sweet child of mine. Oh. 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 Whoa, that was crazy, man. I watched all the Marvel movies. They are pretty good, except there's a few ones that are boring, but man, this one's gonna be pretty fun. Of course, not like Multiverse of Madness, which I think it's gonna be fucking madness, but I think this one is gonna be pretty insane too, and it's gonna be like a nice Thor movie if they do the same thing they did on Ragnarok, as in make a movie that's really fun, really colorful. I think this one is gonna be pretty cool. So I'm gonna watch this for sure. But oh man, what a trailer, dude. That was awesome. So without further ado, we can oh shit, there's no chat on. Okay, hold up. I gotta fix the chat. That means you guys. Boom. There we go. Perfecto. So there's many videos we have to watch. Okay.
I released a form of this.
So we have this explaining the borders of the 22nd century, which seems pretty cool.
The world is so unequal.
We have this video of this YouTuber Hoser that which country is the most unequal. Let's start, let's start with a banger. All right, let's start with Whatifalthist, and this video that I think it's gonna be, Whatifalthist. I love his content. I think he's one of my favorite YouTubers out there, and you guys recommended him to me, and I really enjoy consuming his content. So let's see what he thinks about the borders of the 22nd century. Kind of a strange concept to talk about, but let's look at his thumbnail for a second. He has an independent Cape region of South Africa. I think that would make some sense. I don't know why he has southern Brazil as independent. I think this might be racially motivated, and I think some of these things might be racially motivated, which I'm always conflicted with stuff like that. We got Colombia in blue, Mexico in blue, Venezuela in blue, which I'm guessing this is sort of the West, or the NATO, the European Union, as you would call it. And really, really interesting. We've got Cuba in blue as well. Europe, we got an independent Scotland. We've got a joint Scandinavia. We've got a Germany that looks kind of weird, like a Germany that sort of resembled some other Germany. Belgium and the Netherlands seem to be together. We've got a Turkish empire that goes from Libya to, the Balkans, the southern Balkans. So that's funny. We've got, there's a lot of things going on here. A massive Chinese empire that just swallowed Mongolia and Siberia. We've got a united Korea. Thailand is now Siam again. Philippines, Borneo. Gosh, there's just a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things going on here. Let's just stop wasting time and let's go for this video. Russia gets oofed, I guess. I watched it by myself already. Whatifalthist always believes in a Turkish empire. True, that's kind of strange. Yeah, but you're kind of right. He always talk about Turkey that way.
And people since then have really wanted me to make a video explaining why I made these what appear to be pretty strange border predictions for the world in 100 years. Well, here it is.
And I'm gonna eat.
This is a video.
I hope you guys don't mind.
Through the borders of every continent
breakfast
to explain what I think they'll be like in the year 2120. So without ado, let's get started. A couple times I've wondered what's exactly the product that would pander to Whatifalthist fans the best. Well, I think I found it.
I wondered that too.
Analysis is a consulting firm that helps with companies, governments, philanthropists, and the like advance our collective civilization.
R.I.P. Canada.
They're aligned with Whatifalthist and the goals of helping our society through the crisis that we're about to face with all the wisdom we'll need. Like Whatifalthist, they try to look at the historical trends that result in the rise and fall of civilizations and then project them forwards into the future.
Okay, interesting. The West, we've got Latin America, Orthodox civilization, Islam.
Future. They also have an incredible brief that you can start reading for free, which covers the exact theory. Something I want to remind this audience about is that this map isn't gospel, and I'm not certain the world will turn out like this. It's often funny for me when my fans take this map and other maps I make more seriously than I do. And this map is a series of implicit assumptions that I think will be correct, but could easily
my
be...
4 trends for the century. Greater wealth. We come to terms with technology. The clash of civilizations. God damn. The internet and religion weaken the state.
Wrong. For more information on what the assumptions I'm
What's
making
the time in Mexico?
It's
on 1 p.m. I think. Yeah.
As an example, I make the assumption that one group of humans won't genetically engineer themselves into superhuman status and gain world domination, or runaway climate change doesn't occur. Both of these are within the range of possibility, however. Or I've heard compelling arguments both for greater centralization and greater decentralization in the future, and I'm frankly not sure what side will win, and so I created a midway scenario here. As I always say, I'm betting against God here, and there are infinite ways to be wrong with predictions and only a handful to be right. With that out of the way, let's get started. Part 1. North America. Canada is the most confusing and complicated part of this map. In a previous rendition of the script, just
R.I.P. Canada, my guy. What?
Took a tremendous...
I mean, An independent Quebec, okay, makes sense. I could see that. Independent Ontario and British Columbia, and then you got the Northern Territories and like Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Why? I don't know. Well,
Amount of the
let's
video,
learn.
but luckily enough,
Oh,
since then, I've made a video about the potential future of Canada. Click the link to that video for more details. The long and short of it, however, is that Canada is a loose confederacy of various provinces with very different self-interests, and these provinces build various coalitions and arrangements in order to keep Canada a unified country. However, I think that due to a combination of a crisis in Canada's identity and very different demographic trends with aging between the western and eastern provinces of Canada means that the ideologically more conservative and aligned with the U.S. western prairie provinces will want to join America at the middle of the century. Looking at cycles across American history, the U.S. will likely be going through a golden age at the middle of the century, meaning this will look very attractive, while at the same time, eastern Canada would be going through horrific aging, thus depressing its economy. Once the prairie provinces go, the tapestry of alliances that holds Canada together starts to fray. Quebec, the French-speaking province that continually nearly secedes, leaves Canada if anything remotely stressful happens. Likewise, if these two regions leave, it means British Columbia.
I don't know, man. I mean, do Canadians, especially again from the provinces, he called them the prairie provinces, do they want to join the U.S.? Is this like a thing they want? I've heard a lot of anti-American or like very pro-Canadian identity arguments from Canadians. So I don't know. I don't know if that would really be a thing.
Which is culturally and economically distinct from the rest of Canada and the U.S. as an independent country. The Maritimes cut off from Quebec joins the U.S., while Ontario, the proudest Canadian province, remains independent and becomes wealthy based off exploiting loopholes in the U.S. legal code due to its central geography.
Yeah.
I don't agree with the modern consensus that the U.S. is really in decline as a superpower, at least not the fall of Rome that so many pessimists believe. I think the U.S. is becoming the next Roman Empire in a real sense, and will experience several gold ages and dark times across the next century, with the current period being one. I think the problems the U.S. is facing now are comparable to the struggles of the late Roman Republic or the Russian Revolution, and is a short period of failure before the U.S. goes through another period of strength. However, this map underplays America's strength since the U.S. will almost certainly dominate the colonization of space, which isn't on this map of Earth. Meanwhile, when looking at Central America and the Caribbean, we're largely looking at how things are now. Realistically, if you look at a map of the world based off...
Come on, baby. Mexico annexing Guatemala. Let's do it.
Countries that the U.S. has as allies, it looks very different than a worldview based just off sovereign official borders. Basically, every country in this area is a U.S. satellite or ally.
Yeah.
However, I think this process will be expedited and helped by the assimilation of Hispanic Americans, which is already occurring very quickly. Imagine how much it would help American-Latin relations in a country where many prosperous American states are plurality Hispanic, and Hispanics have gained significant political influence, maybe even with a Hispanic president. What's often normal is that former communist countries become very capitalist upon getting out from the boot of their normally hated communist ruling parties and become capitalist since they know how bad communism is. I see this process happening in Cuba. I think Cuba will become the wealthiest country in Latin America, also due to its proximity to the U.S.
Probably.
And the wealthy and influential
Probably. I really think this is the case.
Florida,
or this
which
will be the
probably
case.
Flood money into Cuba to modernize it. Part 2, South America. I don't see a lot of border changes in South America. As I said before in a previous video, South America has actually been hurt in some ways by its borders making too much sense, in that in almost all cases, South American countries are built around fertile heartlands surrounded by impassable jungles, deserts, or mountains on the fringes. This is a blessing in making this unusually peaceful continent, but also means there's never competition or pressure to really improve between countries. I also don't see Latin America
Thomas.
Really
How are you
having
doing?
a big industrial push outside the areas bordering the U.S., since this area really hasn't...
Whoa. I know the amount of other videos I've made that I referenced in this video is insane, but this is my video explaining why Latin America will remain poor. What the fuck?
Big industrial push outside the areas bordering the U.S.
Well, we border the U.S.,
really
so I guess that's good.
Moved forward economically as compared to the rest of the world in 300 years. The U.S. allies here are the ones the U.S. largely has now. I'm adding Venezuela for the exact reason I see Cuba becoming an American ally. The future of Venezuela as a society is largely dictated by whether they can get their act together before or after we switch away from a predominantly oil economy, if we do. The only border shift I could see is that the wealthy, white, and culturally distinct southern Brazil splits off from the rest of the Brazil in the crisis of the third world that I anticipate in the next few decades, in which central Brazilian power will become autocratic and weak. I would see them align themselves with the white southern cone of U.S. allies that exists in the region like Uruguay, Argentina, or Chile.
What do you think? Who will be the most powerful countries in the 21st century? Well, apart from, I think the European Union will remain a powerhouse. The U.S., it's going to decline, but I think it still be pretty powerful. We got the obvious answer of China. But I think places like India will gain a lot of influence. I think Turkey will gain a lot of influence too on the Middle East. I think maybe Brazil. I don't know. I don't think Brazil will become, but I think Turkey and India will be places that maybe right now we don't hear a lot about, but in the future, I think they will gain a lot more influence and become at least regional powers. But no, I don't believe there will be a Turkish empire like he does.
Europe. I have a complicated.
Just got here. Which one is this? This is the Whatifalthist explaining the borders of the 22nd century. All is good. Just been getting a lot of assignments out of the way. How are you? I'm doing good, man. Honestly, just got out of Easter vacations, so
of what Europe's future will be.
So I'm pretty well
I'll cover
rested.
in more detail in some future video. However, I think the U.S. is going through a crisis of identity that will result in the U.S. pulling back from Europe, which the U.S. will ostensibly have little reason to protect. However, I don't think either party realizes how necessary the Americans are to the functioning of the modern European order. At the same time, Europe will be experiencing a demographic and aging crisis that will rip their societies apart. I think this crisis will humble Europe, which will now have to painfully realize it is no longer the center of the world that it was 100 years ago.
And we just saw some of this. For example, I was reading the news about Germany and how they are rebuilding their military. So
the Americans will then return to Europe as America's population remains stable while Europe's is rapidly collapsing. The Europeans, who have seen many horrors between collapsing economies, civil wars, external wars, and the like, will then acquiesce to greater American influence, who will gradually colonize Europe in a process that I don't think either will consciously view as colonization, as various European countries are gradually weakened into forming a pan-European confederacy under American guidance.
All right.
The explanation for this is too long, and so I made it a text wall, but I think the comparison to the Greeks and Romans is very apt, in which the Romans tried to liberate the Greeks from the Macedonians, and then the Romans, who greatly respected the Greeks, tried various self-governance schemes for the region, only to realize that Greek civilization was in active decline, and as the Greeks continually failed, the Romans gradually took over the area. For more details, I would check out the book The Coming Caesars by Amaury de Riencourt, which looks at
The Coming Caesars. Sounds like a pretty interesting book.
Parallels between the Greeks and the Romans and modern Europeans and Americans in a very compelling way. As Europe becomes less a place of power and more a museum of declining nations, borders will change to make sense to more geographically and ethnically.
Yeah, I agree.
Based off some war in the 18th century. Ethnically split nations like Belgium, Austria, and Switzerland will likely split or become part of their co-ethnic nations. Likewise, the UK will likely divide with Scotland splitting off, partially driven by the decline of Britain from great power, and as religion becomes less of a sticking point, Ireland will unify. As transportation has gotten a lot faster since the Industrial Revolution, countries like Slovakia, the Baltics, and Scandinavia will form confederacies with their co-ethnics to gain more leverage and power in a world of bigger countries. As Europe becomes weaker and more inside the American sphere of influence, I think the Americans will buy Greenland off the Danes. Greenland is central to missile warfare, and as the world warms, will probably become the center of the...
I don't know about this. I mean, America already had an offer for Greenland back when Donald Trump was president. I think they didn't sold it. So unless the U.S. makes like a very large offer for Greenland, I don't think Denmark is gonna, agree to sell Greenland, right? For the same reason America wants it, right? Denmark, wants that very valuable island of Greenland. So I don't think they will sell it easily. It could happen. America has done a lot of things, but I just don't see it, especially now, which I'm guessing he's going to talk about northern trade routes of the Arctic, which again, that's very valuable.
The Arctic trade routes, thus making it extremely strategically important for the U.S. Due to the collapse of belief in the shared Russian mission as a nation alongside their massive...
Germany just put 100 billion euros to their military. That's a lot of money. Wow.
Collapse. I don't think Russia or the Balkans will survive. For a bunch of reasons, I'm bullish on Turkey as a future superpower, and with the Balkans experiencing the fastest population collapses of anywhere in the world, often losing half their population over the next few decades, I see the populous Muslim world just moving settlers into the Balkans and Crimea, turning them into cultural extensions of the Middle East. Yikes. I also see similar trends in the Christian Caucasus nations like Armenia and Georgia, which are under very similar demographic and cultural circumstances. The US doesn't have a lot of cultural or strategic interests in the Balkans, and would allow this to happen when distracted elsewhere. But we would see a frontier develop between Christian and Muslim worlds at the edge of the Hungarian plain around modern Belgrade, which is the natural geographic choke point. With the collapse of Russia, I see two powers gaining more influence in the void that Russia leaves in Eastern Europe, the Poles and the Turks. I see the Poles expanding east, seizing Belarus and western Ukraine, which will become a buffer state between Turkish, Russian, and Western influence. I see the Turks gaining dominance over the Black Sea, as they have for most of the modern period, using Crimea as a detached peninsula with a large Muslim minority as an airbase to control the region from. I see them allying with...
Europeans need to have more kids to stop our demographic decline. There are less babies and more older people incoming. And that's going to be pretty bad for the people, for the young people. Because your taxes at the end of the day are going to have to pay for all the retirement, all the pensions of the older generation. So yeah, I agree. I would hope that European people had more babies. I understand it's a very complicated subject. You know, you can't just simply tell people to have babies. And I don't know how really we would solve that problem. But I hope you guys do. I don't want to see a decline in Europe. Yeah, Germany will have the third highest military spending in the world, probably. What do you guys think about that? You know, that's kind of an interesting thought. You know, when was the last time Germany had that big of an army? Not to say that they're going to do something like that, obviously, but it's just how times truly are changing now. Japan, I also heard they are building up their military again. Germany now, with that massive budget increase, becoming the third after China and the US, I'm guessing, ahead of Russia. So that's pretty big news. I don't know why it wasn't bigger news, at least where I live. But that's huge. That's pretty significant at the very least.
With Russia's Muslim minority populations, that they often have a good amount of cultural connection with, like the Chechens and Tatars, who have the highest birth rates of anyone in Russia, and will only get...
Some European countries are, I guess, replacing birth rates with immigrants. True, and I guess it works, you know, but I guess it's complicated in another ways. You know, assimilating immigrants is not easy. It's very politically expensive, right? How many people threw shit at people like Angela Merkel for accepting all those immigrants, right? Bringing immigrants is politically expensive because you become unpopular because there's a lot of people that just don't like immigrants. So it's complicated because of that. Then you got the cultural, religious barrier that, you know, it exists. And the economic situation, right? You know, adjusting a third world. And I hate to use this analogy because this is a Cold War analogy, you know, the first world and the third world. But I guess assimilating a population that comes from a developing nation is not as easy as you might think. And so, yeah, it's complicated, but that would work. I mean, France is not doing bad. Germany's doing great right now. So I think maybe I could be wrong on that.
More populous over time as Russia's, especially Orthodox Christian population collapses.
I think I saw an article saying Hungary is paying couples for every kid they have.
Grassland of Russia,
shit.
As a
you know, guys, let's move to Hungary,
depending on how much
dude.
the mission of a unified Russia has failed at this point, Chernozem might continually attempt to join up with the fragment of what used to be Russia. Also, spoilers for a future video, I think there's a decent chance that a new civilization develops in this area. Part 4, Africa. There are two
this is going to be
interesting
interesting.
to understand to figure out the Africa you see on this map. The first is that I think the Muslim world will industrialize and become wealthy. This is because that region of the world has commonly been wealthy across history, as well as it's the only major one of the 4 Eurasian civilizations that hasn't industrialized. Even so, we've already seen a precedent of industrialization in Turkey and Iran.
Yes, because Russia doesn't have a much large economy.
However, you see no such similar trend for Black Africa, which has none of the preconditions for industrialization. Thus, when you see this mega Morocco, you're looking at what happens when an industrialized Muslim country sees the opportunity to conquer a technologically inferior region. This is keeping with the Moroccan tradition of invading West Africa. It's happened a couple times.
I know his channel is about alternate history, all right? I know. But is Morocco going to invade some of its southern neighbors? I mean, like Mali, Mauritania. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know much about Moroccan modern politics, but I just don't think they're gonna do that. Well, 22nd century, you know.
It's pretty easy to build highways across the Sahara for communication, with the Moroccans creating a second empire across the Sahara and the Sahel.
I could be wrong.
Likewise, I see a similar trend with Turkish influence taking place in Sudan and Northeast Africa. The second dominant trend is that the state doesn't have a strong record in this region of the world and was largely created by Europeans for their own colonial purposes without dealing with local conditions. At the same time, most African nations haven't been able to construct strong national identities, with their governments often being rackets for one ethnic group to extract payments from the others. I call the era since World War II the UN Bretton Woods era, given that it's been an alliance of American power with UN politics to basically keep nation-states operating even when they have no coherent reason to. This system used to make more sense.
What does population growth in Mexico looks like? I think it looks all right. I read the fertility rate is actually going down. So it's 2.1. So we are at like the how do you call it? The replacement rate, but population growth 1.1% annually. I guess that's all right. So yeah, it's looking good. It's not looking great, but you know, we are at the replacement level at least right now. So hey, could be worse, I guess.
Sense when most of the third world countries were inhabited by underpopulated peasant communities, but as the third world became more urbanized, literate, populated, and wealthy, political organizations will have to change to represent their identities more. After Asia, Africa is the top region in the world where I expect atrocities and mass death this century, since it's largely the only region that's having ludicrous population growth, which is the big driver for atrocities. Projections show Africa will have 3 to 4 times China's population, or past 4 billion, by the end of the century.
There's going to be 4 billion people in Africa. That's massive growth. And I, of course, worry about that, but more on the resources kind of side, you know? Like, are we going to be able to feed that many humans? Yeah, much better than someone like Japan. True. Japan is just not doing well with that.
Makes no sense.
What does the Japanese population... Okay. Whoa, 1.3 births per woman. That's from 2019, so it's even a little bit old. The population growth rate, minus 0.2. Yikes. Like, you gotta feel bad. Ukraine, 1.23. So Ukraine is a lot worse. You know, I'm guessing... some of the modern issues might have to do with that.
You love Empire, don't you? Yeah, you want to stay free.
Where's the video? Oh, there we go.
And so there really has to be a big crisis. I see the old African order collapsing and being replaced by a lot of chaos. I see a laboratory
South Korea has a pretty low birth rate.
Theocracies and crypto
True.
states.
A lot of East Asia.
I think this degree of competition will actually be amazing for the continent and its future history, since it will create massive pressures towards improvement in creating African civilizations.
The U.S. might be able to feed Africa. We grow 3 times more food than what our population needs. Really? That's super cool, man. That could be a new market for American products, Africa.
Sort of like how modern Western civilization
Charlemagne.
was formed in the chaos that came after the fall of Rome. I mean, The main geographic problems that kept Africa in poverty until recently are largely gone, so if Africa can formulate a way to wealth, they can achieve it. However, I think there are a couple exceptions to this rule, the first of which is ethnically coherent or resource-bearing territories on the coast that I'm pretty sure would survive
the Yoruba in Nigeria.
States. One is the Igbo in Nigeria, who could export their oil or the oil-bearing mouth of the Congo River, which would become a hub of trade. Finally, Cape Town, which has always been a city-state that's belonged to every continent, I see splitting off as an American ally. Similarly, whenever you get chaotic data sets, you always have a couple outliers. Or in other words, when you get a lot of little crazy states, you'll end up with a couple large empires run by geniuses that dominate their regions, just off statistical chance. At the same time, sub-Saharan Africa is one of the few places that doesn't have a long history of preformed civilization and cultural boundaries, meaning that this region has the potential for great Charlemagne's, Harun al-Rashids, or George Washingtons who could form whole new civilizations. Although, in all fairness, this state could develop anywhere in Africa, I'm putting a bet on East Africa, which has largely seen the best leadership in Africa so far, some of the best nation building, and also the formations of what could be the East African Union, or a federation of Kenya, Tanzania, South Sudan, Rwanda, and Burundi.
I mean, some of these countries have very dynamic economies. So, Kenya, Tanzania, some of the places that have the most economic growth are on this side of Africa. So I wouldn't be surprised if they become one of the most developed nations in Africa if they decide to join, which I would think it'd be a smart choice, a smart decision, at least for them. Japan will only have 80 million people by 2050. That's crazy, man. 80 million people out of what they have right now, 120 million? That's insane. Botswana has great leadership too, I think. Yeah, true. I recently watched a video of Botswana. I don't know if we watch it on stream, but yeah, Botswana has a really good leadership.
Plan on forming a unified country. I honestly don't have really high hopes for this working, but of any one place in Africa, I have the highest hopes of this region.
I agree.
Empire. As the rest of Africa might spiral into war, neighboring areas would seek protection under the East African Union, with a notable example being the resource-rich southeastern province of Katanga in the Democratic Republic of Congo that would sell its resources east through the Indian Ocean rather than west through Kinshasa as it does now. The final spot is Ethiopia, which I think would be the main competitor to form an African empire alongside the East African Union.
Djibouti, Eritrea.
Ethiopia is the only main country in sub-Saharan Africa to industrialize, and also is the main one that is a large history of a strong state before European colonization.
True. I have a friend from Ethiopia, and he's always very proud about its country's history and how they weren't colonized by Europeans. I mean, I guess they were sort of annexed by Italy, but they never surrendered. So that's cool. So yeah, Ethiopia. I have good hopes for Ethiopia.
For a future African empire. Part 5. Asia.
Okay,
the main trend that I see borne out in Asia over this next century is closing the technological gap that Western civilization has had over the last 500 years. In a lot of ways, this is pulling us back into the Middle Ages, in which countries that have had long-standing geopolitical, demographic, or strategic advantages since the time of Marco Polo will again gain dominance over their civilizations. Starting in the West, I've already talked about the Turks a bit in their other continents. In short, there's a reason the Turks...
He loves talking about the Turks, man. He loves talking about
the Middle East for almost all of the last 1,000 years. They have cultural, geographic, and military advantages over the dispossessed Arabs. I think as oil will probably become less important, the Middle East will revert to the large empires that have ruled it for thousands of years, with the Turks and Iranians being the obvious contenders. I think the Turks will win in a conflict against the Iranians, like they've done the last several times, due to their greater wealth, technological progress, population, and sharing Sunni identity with most of the area.
Okay, so let's see. We've got weak state in Egypt, failed states in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, surprisingly, oil-dependent Iran and the Gulf states. So I guess that's his argument to say that Turkey can build a neo-Ottoman empire, which I would disagree with that. I don't think that's the case. Plus, Lebanon seems to be doing fine. Israel, sort of doing fine. I don't know. I don't know about this one.
Turks are largely surrounded by failed states, so this is easier than you'd think. I see the Turks establishing a series of client states outside their direct sphere of influence, in places like Oman, the Hejaz, and Libya. One of the most fraught decisions I've
Maybe.
struggled with
I
in
don't
this
know.
map was whether Israel would survive. On one hand, if the Muslim world industrializes, Israel is dead, since it's so hated by the surrounding Muslims. However, the Jews are a stubborn people that are hard to kill, and I see the Turks, who have a history of multi-ethnic.
What? Why do you say it like that, bro?
However, the Jews are a stubborn people that are hard to kill, and I see the Turks.
They are stubborn people that are hard. I mean, I know he doesn't mean bad, but it just sounded a little bit weird, especially when you consider history and the context. But I think probably Israel will survive, especially not based on its own power, but based on the fact that they are an American ally and a very strong American ally. So even if the Muslim world, and this is just my opinion, but I think even if the Muslim world industrializes and they want to destroy Israel, I don't think that's going to happen because of how much the USA really likes Israel. Bruh, a lot of Europeans in the Middle Ages and early modern era had a respect for Ethiopia because it was an ancient Christian kingdom with links to biblical stories. True, I could see that.
Who have a history of
Which would make a lot of
multi-ethnic empires and
sense.
cooperating with the Jews. In effect,
Christianity
working
in
with the
Ethiopia
Jews to
does
keep
have a
down the
very
Arab
strong
subjects of their
history
empire.
and link.
However, another point of view is that the Israelis also might be able to create an effective Arab coalition that keeps the Turkish Empire from forming in the first place. I see the ethnic Turkish states in Central Asia becoming allies of the Turkish nation due to their cultural reasons. I redrew the borders here to fit more around actual ethnic borders in the region because, as of now, the borders of Central Asia were literally designed by Stalin to screw over any future independent countries.
Literally.
These areas will probably become wealthy and central to the world economy as Asia becomes wealthy and the old Silk Road trade centers grow up again. If the Islamic world industrializes, we will also get the second pole of the Middle East. Iran sees power. The countries to Iran's east, like Afghanistan or Pakistan, are largely artificial, unstable, and created for political reasons, and I don't see them surviving. Under those conditions, we would return to the previous
We've got
situation.
something interesting here. So there's no Pakistan. Instead, we got Baluchistan and Pashtunistan, sort of joining with Afghanistan, the Pashtun people. So very interesting take.
Which Persia would have a large sphere
I could see that. Pakistan has been struggling a lot as a country.
Cultural influence
in like
allies
modern
in the Afghan
times.
mountains, but would leave these geographically tough and unruly regions to their own practical self-governance. I think India will go through a period of painful, intense politics over the next few decades before becoming wealthier, working off the chip on their shoulder from British colonialism, and then move on to becoming the stable, isolationist civilization they've been for the last 4,000 years. I don't see Bangladesh or Pakistan as successful states, and so think that as India continues to grow and get richer, that India will suck in both into their economic and then afterwards cultural and political order. As India mellows out and asks to work with Muslim territories, will start to construct its identity around the shared Indic civilization rather than Hinduism. Burma, which is the rice bowl for this region and geographically and culturally connected to the broader Indic world, will also probably end up in the orbit and as an ally to a mature and wealthy India. The main reason I have China eat so much of Siberia and Central Asia is just sheer demographics. The whole of Siberia and Central Asia combined has a population of less than 100 million, while China has a population of 1.5 billion. The thing that's kept the Chinese from populating and settling these areas, many of which can support far more people. I mean, the Chinese side of the border is 200 million people and the Russian is 4, than they do today, is a combination of how the Chinese were militarily inferior to the native inhabitants of these areas who were nomads, and Russian power.
Some people say India will surpass China in population by 2027. I think that would make a lot of sense. They're very close already. They both have like 1.4 or 1.3 and 1.4 billion people. So that would make a lot of sense. Baluchistan region, people fighting for independent country. Wow. So they are already independence movements there. That's interesting.
Both of which are going to go away. I also have much of East Asia join the Chinese
by
orbit,
Mongolia.
since as China industrializes, it will force these countries into inextricably close economic cooperation.
Korea.
The main thing that keeps these countries from being Chinese allies is that the Communist Party is cruel and morally corrupt. However, in a lot of ways, the Communist Chinese Party is a deviant from most of Chinese history, in which regimes have generally been pretty honorable and not too expansionist. At the same time, Japan and Korea have been Chinese allies for most of their histories and have a switch that basically allows them to switch allegiance
not
to
when it
whoever
comes to
happens
recent
the powerful
history,
country
that's
at the
for
time,
sure.
which is how they've been able to so successfully take up Western culture. What I think will happen is that as China collapses into its warlord period, the Communist Party will become more totalitarian and cruel. Then we'll move over to the war.
What I would agree with is the decline of the Communist Party. I would agree with that. Is China gonna eat half of Siberia from Russia? Well, you have to remind yourself that Russia has nukes, okay? China also has nukes, but Russia has a lot more nukes. So even if China, which China is already a lot more powerful than Russia, even if China really wants and really needs Siberia, I don't think they can get it. Like, why would Russia give up Siberia to China? When they have nuclear weapons, they can say, no, I'm not going to give you this. And if you invade me, if you go to war with me, I'm just going to nuke like half your cities and like cause a lot of damage. So I think this is very far-fetched, but who knows? He made Japan Chinese allies. Yeah, that's weird, isn't it? Some Chinese nationalists want to retake the Russian Far Eastern lands because it was once part of the Qing Empire from the 1500s to the 1800s. True, I could see how people would want this. I just don't see it happening, man.
Warlord period,
especially when you consider
against
nukes,
the Communist Party, I think we'll have a nationalist and socially conservative China, but also one that's relatively honorable, and so all the nations in the area would be willing to work with China. Finally, I see the collapse of Indonesia, which is, again, one of the most fraught decisions I've made.
Could happen.
Indonesia really doesn't make a lot of sense as a country, both geographically and culturally. But the Indonesians have done a pretty good job of constructing a national identity in the 20th century. And that's not something I covered about in my videos of countries that will collapse, but I do think it's important. I consider the survival of Indonesia a toss-up depending on whatever the leadership involved is. I have the region split here between Chinese and American proxies, with the Americans supporting Java, the most populated island close to Australia, and the Chinese supporting Borneo and Sumatra and other islands that largely view Java as their oppressor, and also they'd sell goods to the Chinese economy. Whatifalthist, and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, sir, and also they'd sell...
Yeah, and it's also very interesting how you can see even the borders of Asia, as in the islands closer to Australia and Oceania in general are more American or Western allies, and the islands closer to China are more Chinese allies. So very interesting. I could definitely see this. I think this is very likely to happen. If not this exact scenario, something very similar to this. But hey, video is over. We are about 7 viewers, so thank you all so much for watching. Let's keep going. And what other video can we watch? Should we watch which country is the most unequal? I want to watch a Drew Darnell video. Okay, let's watch this one. What historical figures might look like if they lived today? Okay, and there seem to be pretty insane scenarios because, like I said, we can see here in the thumbnail Henry VIII, and here's the classic Henry VIII photo. This is the photo of today. So hey, pretty cool, pretty interesting.
Hello guys, and
do you think there are some northern Mexican states that would more likely secede than others? That's an interesting question. I really don't think so. There's not an independence movement going on in any Mexican state. So I don't think there's going to be any possibility of a Mexican state trying to secede. They might become, some of the northern states might become closer to America and American culture and the Mexican Americans living across the border. But I don't really see it happening, and I don't think the U.S. wants it either, so I don't think it would happen.
Welcome back to Mystery Scoop.
I'm gonna binge watch the Napoleon series next. I don't know if on the next live stream, but that's the next series I'm gonna watch.
An artist uses AI tools to create a modern version of historical figures.
Okay.
Have you ever wondered what historical figures might look like if
Da
they
Vinci,
lived today?
I have wondered.
Well, a digital artist named Hidrelli from Brazil had a similar question, and he used modern AI tools to figure it out.
Man, this is gonna be so creepy.
He created a realistic depiction of some of history's most iconic figures, capturing their main facial characteristics, while keeping in mind that if they lived in this day
and they have like modern haircuts and stuff
and age, modern lifestyle would have created a slightly twisted version of them. Let's have a look at a few amazing examples of his work with a little AI animation thrown in the
mix. Julius Caesar, and damn, he looks like every lawyer I know. But it does look like a Julius Caesar. Like, keep in mind, obviously he's wearing a suit, right? Very modern. The hairstyle, sort of more modern-like. What do you guys think? I think this looks accurate. Solomon Islands signed defense pact with China because China will give him $500 million. Australia is angry. Oh man, China and Australia do have like a little rivalry. Did it just moved? Okay, Henry VIII. I don't know about you, but I really think this is the perfect depiction of Henry VIII. And of course, we are seeing him without his fancy clothes and his little hat over there. But come on, I mean, Henry was fat and kind of nasty. And, you know, this man looks kind of like that, you know? No fat shaming, by the way. Oh, shit. That's kind of creepy, though. Oh, that's super creepy, man. That's creepy as hell. Da Vinci, okay. So pretty interesting depiction of Da Vinci. I don't know if it looks 100% accurate. The nose, you know, looks pretty similar. The eyebrows, maybe Da Vinci had them a little bit thicker. I mean, you know, his skin is a little darker than I would expect. You know, Da Vinci was Italian, so I don't know. Where was Da Vinci from? Was he from southern Italy? Oh my god, dude. You've got Da Vinci smiling and winking at you. Holy freaking god. I'd follow him into battle. Yeah, true. Joan of Arc. Okay. Okay. Very Mediterranean look. Okay, you know. I'd follow her into battle, you know. Of course, she's missing her iconic armor. Is that how you say it? Armor? Damn, it's just creepy, man. It's creepy as hell. Livia Drusilla. I don't know who this person is, to be honest. That's so far from China, though, so if there ever is a war, they really can't expect to do much, to be honest. I don't know who this person is. Some kind of... Hadrian. Okay. This is a really good depiction, bro. The hair, extremely similar. The beard, so similar. Even the gaze. God damn it. It's creepy, dude. Okay, but Solomon Islands give him an island to China for a military base. Antinous. I'm not entirely sure if I know who he is. But that looks pretty realistic. NGL, not gonna lie. Mary, holy shit, talk about, Henry VIII. So now we have Mary, the Queen of Scots. Was this the Mary that was her daughter? It does look very different. And again, the clothing, right? But I think it does look like a Mary. I don't think it's about the faces, though. I think it's about seeing them in modern outfits. What's kind of weird, you know? You imagine Julius Caesar with classic Roman attire. You don't really imagine him with a suit. You know, same with Mary. You imagine her with, you know, a an English dress, not really modern outfits. You know what I'm saying? I think Emperor Hadrian was from a Roman Iberian family. Hell yeah. Iberia, you know, in the house. Spanish Empire, you know. And now we got, Mary Tudor. Sorry, I mixed the Marys. I mixed both Marys. But damn. I mean, Mary looking good, bro. Modern haircut? Alright. Kind of looks like a Karen haircut. I don't know. But she looking good, you know. Looks nice. She looks kind of mean on her portrait. No, George Washington, dude. Whoa. This looks like a real picture, by the way, like a real person. I mean, he looks a little chubbier than than the OG George Washington, but Jesus Christ, Karen, LOL. I don't know how I feel about this one. Newton, all right. You know, looking good, looking attractive. You know, Newton could have been a model in nowadays. Yeah, I mean, he looks pretty similar. Although he looks older on his portrait. You know, let's see who else we have. Bach, all right. We've got Sebastian Bach. I love it, man. I don't know why, but he kind of looks like a character of The Office. But yeah, I think that's very an accurate representation of what Bach would look like. Or Bach. How do you say it in German? You know, Bach, Bach. Who fucking knows? Johann Sebastian Bach. I prefer the OG Washington. Yeah, true. And no way, bro. We've got Beethoven, and he looks like he's in a boy band, you know, like in a 90s boy band. No way, bro. He looks like a member of the Backstreet Boys. But hey, he looks good, so can't hate on the guy. But yeah, Beethoven looking good, bro. You pronounce it pretty well. Oh, thank you, man. Oh yeah, that's the same guy. Bach is a time traveler. He looked really similar, dude. Michelangelo. Whoa. It looks very similar, though. That's how I would imagine a Michelangelo to be like. You know? I don't know. Bro, it's so creepy the way they smile and move their eyes. But hey, 10 out of 10. Very cool. Young Hercules? Alright. He does have the face of an Hercules. I could see that, alright? You know, I could see the resemblance. My guy is a little chubby on the face, but hey, no hate. Uncanny Valley. Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, that's how I imagine most, how most Stoics look like. But yeah, I read Meditations, so, I do know quite some things about Marcus Aurelius. But yeah, I mean, that's how I would imagine him to be nowadays. You know, very stoic. He has even a very stoic face. So hey, good for the man, you know. Bull bear, all right. Looking very similar though. Don't know much about him, but at least I do know who he is. And yeah, moving the face, all right, kind of creepy. Who's the last one?
That's all for today, folks.
Oh, that's all. I thought we were gonna have Isabella the first. But hey, you know. Hello, Gustav. How's it going, bro? Too much baby fat on Modern Herc. Rejected. he did have a lot of fat and had like a baby face, you know. Russia says he will destroy Starlink satellite if he will not stop providing internet to Ukraine. Jesus Christ. Well, that was super fun. You know, a little thought experiment. Let's watch this video of MOnsieur C that's called A Demographic Crisis is Inevitable. You know, I don't know what you guys think. You know, MOnsieur C is someone that I disagree a lot with. I think he comes more from a conservative background. With that being said, I do enjoy his videos and his takes, and I think it's an opportunity that we get to learn maybe from someone that has different opinions than us. So, you know?
It's inevitable. For years, we've heard scientific sources tell us that birth rates within developed countries are in decline, most especially in the global West. The total fertility rate by region in Europe stands at an average of 1.
Okay, you know, let's see the map. So we got Mexico at about the same level that the US, Brazil, Argentina. So kind of Latin America is going to be declining alongside the US. And Europe, of course, is looking pretty bad, as well as East Asia.
Especially in the global West. The total fertility rate by region in Europe stands at an average of 1.6.
Yikes.
Well below the bare minimum replacement rate of 2.1. In North America, it stands at 1.8. Even Latin America is falling behind at just 2.0. But this isn't just a fluke decline and an inevitably exponential upward growth of the total population, nor is it exclusive to the West. This trend of decline has been and is virtually assured to continue globally. In Asia, birth rates have fallen from nearly 6.0 on average in 1950 to 2.2 in present. Asia birth rates have fallen from nearly 6.0 on average.
All right, Jesus Christ. Interesting how Argentina and Chile have more birth rates aligned with the US and Europe, and Mexico just looking so red. I mean, having 5-6 children per woman. Look at Iraq, though. Extremely red, having 9 children per woman. Gabon over here looking a little lonely.
Average in 1950 to 2.2 in present day. In Oceania, where Asian and Western
Africa's just built different. Yeah, dude, look at Mali over here. They are just built different. You're 100% right. The Congo, Angola, only some northern African countries, along with southern Africa, have like more West-like rates. Since SpaceX is an American company, so shooting down Starlink satellites could be considered an act of war. That is true. I don't think they would take it lightly, especially since Elon Musk is the wealthiest American,
down from just over 4.0 in 1950.
And the wealthiest man alive.
Africa has managed to remain well above replacement level into the modern day, but even this present rate of 4.4 is a steep fall from the rate of nearly 7.0 in 1950, with present trends suggesting a rapid population crash on that continent is imminent, estimated to bring it to just 2.0 by the end of the century. China, hailed as a population giant and once having so rapidly rising a population that it sought to stabilize this.
And look, the one-child policy, had a huge effect on China as a whole. Look at the population. It's just flat. No growth. I guess you could say no decline, but also no growth. Even Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, they're all declining as well.
Growth through a one-child policy.
Their birth rate
finds itself with a fertility rate of just 1.4, despite having repealed this policy. The similar population titans of the Indian subcontinent have likewise fallen dramatically from an average rate of nearly 7.0, with only Pakistan remaining above replacement level. The causes behind this population decline are numerous and really worthy of their own video. What we'll instead be discussing in this video is what this demographic crisis means for our future. A shrinking or stagnant population means a number of things, but in an economically competitive world, it essentially means a smaller workforce and fewer taxpayers.
And a smaller market to sell your goods and products to.
Workforce means production will decline, meaning GDP will decline, meaning less money will be available to invest domestically, in infrastructure, in defense, in health and welfare. Standard of living declines and taxes must be raised or government spending severely cut back, something politicians are generally unwilling to do in a competitive globalist order. With fewer employees, businesses must grow more efficient through automation of several jobs, downsize their operations, or face collapse. While for a time the population shift will create a brief surplus of jobs which will need to raise their wages in order to compete for a more limited supply of workers, the ultimate need to scale back, automate, or shut down will make job opportunities scarcer, likely leading certain non-essential industries to collapse entirely, especially in the entertainment, leisure, and service fields, as fewer people are able to afford these conveniences and luxuries. The rise in wages and the expense that will of course be shouldered by the businesses employing them will ultimately make the products and services of these jobs all the more expensive, effectively canceling out any benefit the raised wages would have provided. This will be especially consequential when
when you look at things like the markets, it's just very complicated because you have a smaller population, you have a small amount of everything. When it comes to that, your country becomes less productive. You produce less stuff. People have less money. They have to pay more taxes because there's less taxpayers. Governments have to maybe increase spending. It's just or decrease spending with maybe you having a smaller pension or no pension at all. It's just very complicated. And while a lot of people talk about our planet being overpopulated, and it's kind of true in a way, but I think that's not really going to be the problem. But we're going to have an underpopulation problem, which is going to lead to a new plethora of problems that could maybe be made smaller by things like automation, but it's still coming to us. And Japan is already seeing massive struggles because of their population. China too. So it's not something that's like waiting for us 100 years from now. No, it's something that's going to come within the next 1 or 2 or 3 decades. So it's something that we're definitely going to have to live through.
Sector and the price of food skyrockets.
Might take a century though. Maybe, probably.
Further complicate the situation as statistics from the
Thomas, Jesus Christ, dude. It's mad how back in the day my great-great-grandfather was one of 20 kids. Holy crap. Your great-great-great-grandfather was a stud, man. My great-grandfather was one of 14. My grandfather was one of 10. That is true, though. I don't want to have kids, so I am one of 3 brothers. I have 2 other brothers. My dad is one of 5 kids, and my grandparent is also one of 8 kids. So, it's interesting how generationally it keeps getting smaller and smaller. And at least at this point, I don't know about you guys, but I really don't want to have kids.
COVID pandemic have shown a significant dropout from the labor force, as well as a hesitance to budge from a current or previous sector to make ends meet.
How many brothers or sisters do you guys have?
Temporarily. What this means is that when times get hard, the population increasingly turns to the government for financial support, rather than attempt to make money in a field that might be considered unglamorous or physically demanding. Much as we saw during the decline of the COVID pandemic, with the population out of work but coasting off of government aid, businesses will lower their hiring standards in order to draw in more employees. There goes a conservative bias. Something almost certain to cause an upset among those who had previously only been able to obtain their jobs through the acquisition of an expensive college degree or rigorous training. For certain fields, this will be a proper and much needed return to equilibrium because, frankly, a college education is superfluous for
I'm an only child. Okay, that's interesting,
jobs
man.
And virtually needless across the board for any lesser skilled job. Particular vocational and skill-based jobs are certain to remain in high demand, and the cost for these forms of education could be expected to rise, whilst college admissions crash and a restructuring of the education system both from within and from outside will become necessary to maintain a small, highly educated workforce to meet the demands of a small but high-demand economic niche. This fertility decline, which has been ongoing for decades, is no doubt a key motivating factor in the increased demand by politicians to increase immigration flow from poorer or less developed countries where fertility rates are higher.
Okay, let's see what he has to say.
To cushion the blow of the demographic collapse so that when it occurs, the economic impact is not as severe, and as a consequence, political instability is avoided. However, this has proven to be a very faulty strategy as immigrant populations have become increasingly supported by federal aid at the expense of the citizenry. Welfare use...
Whatever, man. Scientists says human population will peak to 10.9 billion and start declining. That's still so we are still gonna see like 2 billion more people. I have only 2 brothers. Hey, same here, man. It's cool to have 2 brothers. Yeah, there's the conservative bias. I understand his point, but I don't necessarily agree. I think immigrants are amongst the groups that receive less state benefit. So I don't know. I think they work really hard for some minimum wages. You know, like some of the jobs that pay less well are the ones generally worked by immigrants. So I don't know why he has this take.
Within the U.S. being dramatically higher among immigrant groups than among native-born populations. Further, fertility rates and willingness to work low-skilled jobs declines dramatically among most immigrant-descendant groups after just one generation and declines further with each subsequent generation, making mass immigration a band-aid solution to a fatal crisis and one which will have a greater consequence later down the line. As resources become scarcer and divides between immigrant and native populations remain, increased competition will naturally drive hostility between the two groups and further within the various groups which make up the immigrant and immigrant-descendant populations as they attempt to look out for the best interests of themselves and their respective groups.
No, I don't think that's how people view it like that, you know? And as someone who is or could be an immigrant, I don't care about other immigrants. I don't have a group identity with other immigrants. Like, yeah, I'm an immigrant. I want other immigrants to do good. No, fuck that, dude. Like, nobody thinks like that. Immigrants in France aren't like pro other immigrants in France. You know, they are pro-French citizens in general. They don't, you know, it's just kind of a weird take.
States which have opted for this temporary solution will be forced to contend with further internal divides which will make emerging from the population collapse all the more difficult if in fact they can survive being torn in multiple directions from the diverging interests of various groups. While this population crash will impact a great majority of the world, smaller and more homogenous countries will find themselves more capable of enduring the hardship and maintaining a state of national unity, whilst entities like the US.
Authoritarian governments might ban conception preventions like condom, but then the third probably by a black market. Yeah, but that's an interesting take. I would be interested to know more about that. Maybe some governments would do something like that. I'm an only child, but when I settle down with someone, I would like 2 boys and 2 girls. Damn, that's interesting, man. 2 boys, 2 girls. Hopefully you can settle down with someone. I don't know how young you are, but you know, if the time comes and the person comes, hopefully you can get there. I don't know about this. Yeah, it's kind of a weird take.
Mexico, and to a lesser extent Russia and China will need to manage.
Okay, well, he said something about Mexico.
Will find themselves more capable of enduring the hardship and maintaining a state of national unity, whilst entities like the US, Brazil, Mexico, and to a lesser extent Russia and China will need to manage a great deal of internal unrest. Almost certainly states who can no longer afford to remain competitive on the global economic stage will retreat to protectionism and isolationism, focusing on restoring internal stability in their own local economies and taking a hard shift toward internal policy.
Tariff reforms
against transnational entities like the UN, NATO, and perhaps even the International Monetary Fund would become unsustainable and dissolve. Entities like the EU and Kanzik would stand a better chance given their level of integration at the local and regional level in the case of the EU, and the overall level of homogeneity and like-minded policy in regard to Kanzik. Worse yet is what's to come.
Israel has free unlimited in vitro treatment for women up to their second child. That's very interesting, man. I guess good for Israel, but I don't know how good that policy is. Probably it's interesting to look at. I'm 23, not rushing into things though. LOL. That's cool though. I think 23 is still pretty young to get married, but I don't know. A lot of people like to marry young. A lot of my friends in Mexico are already not only married, but they already have children. So it's definitely kind of a weird feeling because I don't want to have kids or marry anytime soon. Hello, am I late? You're kind of halfway through the stream, so you're not very late. But I'm glad that you could be here. You know, it's awesome the more people there are. The first company to produce 100% safe method of artificial semination will be $1 trillion company in a year. I think I've heard about that company. I'm not sure if we're talking about the same, but I think I've heard about that.
This demographic crisis is not the direct result of actions by this current youth generation, but the immediate generations which came before. This current generation faces additional hurdles of social and mental troubles brought on by excessive
less dating, and we have less people dating, you know? An iPhone 7 released. More likely to feel lonely. iPhone 7 released. So clearly technology has something to do with it, but
substitution of real-life interaction with that of the online world, troubles which make relationship and family building all the more difficult. Interest in starting families at all is at a dramatic low. Among men, sperm counts and testosterone levels are in heavy decline, while women are increasingly delaying trying for children to instead focus on work or study. This paints a picture of at least one more generation reinforcing the population crash and extending it by an additional 20 or 30 years. Is a global demographic crisis inevitable? Absolutely. Given current trends, it seems too late to prevent it now anywhere outside of Africa. It is now only a matter of how prepared we will be within our individual countries when this crisis arrives, how severely each country will be impacted, and which countries will emerge on top in the aftermath. The US of Z thanks you for watching.
Yikes. Whoa. Pretty sure that might be a result of theologically devoted groups that Israel has high rates. Israel is the only Western country that is growing a whole lot. They could have 24 to 40 million people in 2100. It'd be interesting to see a large Israel. However, can the country of Israel fit that many people? Israel is a pretty small country, so it'd be interesting to see and to know. But yeah, I mean, I could see you guys your points. Let me see, what's the time? Because I do have a date in a while, so I don't think we're going to be able to watch the Suez Crisis videos. But let's watch this real life lore, shall we? Plus social pressure on women in Israel too. I could agree with that. So, why the Ukraine no-fly zone won't ever happen. By real life lore, 1 million views, April 13.
Invaded Ukraine. Throughout these weeks, cities, along with both military and civilian targets across the country, have become subjected to devastating Russian missile and air attacks, raining down from the skies. Across major Ukrainian cities home to millions of people like Lviv, Kiev, and Kharkiv, the chilling sounds of air raid sirens have become...
Yes! Well, do you want to... It's the war of the English language, right? It's 12 minutes. Oh, yeah, for sure. We can see that. We're going to end with these two videos, the oversimplified one and the real life lore. You know, I think that's a great combination of videos.
Begun sounding alarm to residents for the first time since World War II, while thousands have been forced to take shelter beneath the ground in increasingly packed metro stations. Scenes...
You know, I said it before, and I'm going to say it again, but this was one of the dumbest major wars out there. There was no reason for this war, and now it's affected millions and millions of lives, and it's gonna keep affecting millions of lives for months and maybe even years to come. I feel so bad for the people in Ukraine. I think this video is a fundraiser, so if we can support or send a little bit of support, we should definitely do that. And gosh, it's just something that I'm so angry about because it is pointless. It was
eerily
pointless.
Reminiscent of Britons in the London Tube throughout the German Blitz campaign of 1940. And just like for months during that era, the battle...
Israel needs to desalinate water. Either way, improved desalination tech so much it becomes like bottled water, or they'll reach scarcity. True.
For control of the skies over Ukraine is ongoing, with neither side so far being capable of achieving complete air superiority, even though the Ukrainian Air Force is overall badly outgunned. The Russian Air Force possesses around 11 times as many fighters,
wow,
24 times as many dedicated attack or bomber craft, and roughly 13 times as many helicopters as the Ukrainian Air Force has got. In a longer war of attrition, with all things else being equal, the Russians simply have the numbers to continue sustaining heavy losses in the air, while the Ukrainians do not. And so the math for eventual air superiority is...
If you think about it, that's always what the Russian army has done. They have so many people that they can really just throw their people at the enemy and win a war. I mean, that's why Finland, at the end of the day, surrendered to Russia, despite really winning the Winter War, because they know that Russia has so many people that they could keep this war going for a long time. Ukraine is really repelling a lot of the Russian attacks. However, they can't keep doing it forever. And I don't know if that's Russia's plans, but if it is, that's just really dark.
On the Russian side. And once air superiority is achieved, the likelihood for a Kremlin victory
I've never had much patience for Mr. C. The guy has a giant blind spot to cultures and the capacity of people to rally around the idea of a tribe. True.
Volodymyr Zelensky, along with numerous Ukrainian civilians and diplomats,
here's the ultimate chat, bro. You know, have you guys seen pictures of Zelensky? You know, joining the military. I mean, what a guy, dude. You can see this is a very natural photo. Well, maybe, you know. But what a guy, you know. What a giga Chad. He is built
with
different.
The West, America, and NATO to assist the country by ordering a total closure of the skies above to Russian warplanes.
Okay.
A no-fly zone.
To create a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
Global shortages are going to absolutely wreck birth rates everywhere. Imagine feeding 6 kids, but the costs like feeding 12 kids. Yeah, true. And I think that's what I'm most worried about. Now, you guys saw that a few days ago was like a protest by scientists, and they are claiming that we have like 7 years to global climate catastrophe. I think that's going to impact birth rates a lot more, and they are going to accelerate the process of civilization collapse, whatever that really means. But I think that's very true and very dangerous. I've heard Russia is trying to win by 9th of May since it's Russia's victory day.
The accurate description
That's a really interesting thought.
Mean by a no-fly zone is actually an aerial combat zone.
A no-fly zone.
Marco Rubio.
What it means
what an ass,
World War
dude.
III.
Because if an American pilot shoots down a Russian pilot, that's a declaration of war.
Many parliaments within NATO-allied countries of Eastern and Northern Europe, like Estonia,
Lebanon is
Latvia,
suffering from
Lithuania,
a food
and Slovenia,
shortages
have
because of the
all
Ukraine
called for the
conflict.
no-fly
Wow.
zone to be established. But despite all of these urgent requests, poll after poll carried out across countries in Western Europe have consistently shown low support among the general Western European public for a no-fly zone over Ukraine. However, the same cannot be said of the American public, where several polls there have shown consistently high support for one throughout the invasion, like a poll from Reuters on the 4th of March that showed 74% of Americans supported the implementation of a no-fly zone.
Wow.
A CBS poll from the 11th of March that found 59% of Americans supported one, and a Quinnipiac poll from the 16th of March that found nearly 1 in 3 Americans still disagreed with President Biden's decision to not impose one. But despite all of this public pressure within and the mounting pressure coming in from NATO allies,
When the video of Trump making fun of Rubio's water incident, don't care more for Trump, but it's hilarious. True. I think I saw that back in the day when it was happening, and it's pretty hilarious.
and the Ukrainian government
Should we watch a Trump compilation someday? I mean, that'd be maybe a little bit funny. I don't know.
President Biden and NATO have thus far continuously resisted these pleas and steadfastly refused
Have you heard about
to
two
implement
helis
the
which
no-fly
Russia
zone
claimed
over
blew up
Ukraine,
fuel
and they
tanks
are
inside Russia?
unfortunately correct
I don't think
to
I've heard
continue
that.
doing so. And these are all of the many reasons why. Despite the apparent fact that many Americans are in favor of the no-fly zone, I'd also wager that most of those Americans don't really understand what a no-fly zone actually means.
Probably.
It means setting up a zone, in this case the entirety of the airspace above Ukraine, and then demanding that no flights from anyone take place through that zone. The biggest danger with declaring a no-fly zone like this is what happens after the declaration, because the declaring power must be willing to enforce it. If Russian jets decide to ignore the demand and continue their operations, then it means that NATO and American jets
And that's the thing, right? Because they're gonna have to blow up a Russian jet, and that's a declaration of war. And that could go really wrong, especially considering that Vladimir Putin is fucking insane. Finland says we're working on joining NATO. Russia is saying we're going to deploy a nuke in Finland border. Yeah, Russia's becoming really aggressive towards Finland and Sweden that are not part of NATO, yet they are considering it. It makes sense that Europeans don't want a no-fly zone since we are closer to Russia than America. Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think a no-fly zone is not the best thing to do right now because, you know, we just had a clear example of what can go wrong.
And engage them, potentially resulting in aerial battles between American and Russian pilots with the high chance for casualties taking place on either side.
Yep.
In the past 30 years, America and its allies have declared 4 of these no-fly zones with various results. A northern and southern no-fly zone in Iraq leading up to the Gulf War and the 2003 US invasion, a no-fly zone over Bosnia in the mid-1990s, and another over Libya in 2011. In each of these cases, the United States utilized its vastly superior air force and conventional military capabilities to enforce its will in the skies against opponents who could offer up little resistance. Saddam's Iraq, the Republika Srpska proto-state in Bosnia, and the Serbian government, and Gaddafi's Libya. In the most recent no-fly zone that was declared over Libya back in 2011, American and NATO warplanes managed to completely alter the course of the entire Libyan civil war that was going on against Gaddafi by denying his forces any access to the skies and bombing his strategic positions on the ground. And NATO didn't lose a single plane throughout that entire operation because they...
Not a single one, meaning that Libya's air force was probably not good.
They were overwhelmingly more powerful.
Yeah.
But a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be inherently different from all of these because Russia possesses far, far more capabilities to retaliate than any other target of an American no-fly zone has before. Despite Russia's military setbacks in Ukraine, the Russian armed forces are generally still considered to be the second most powerful in the world behind the United States, with the second highest number of ballistic missile submarines in service, and one of only 3 militaries worldwide that operate strategic bombers. But the greatest military asset that Russia possesses that none of those other regimes in the past did is a lot of nuclear weapons. In fact, Russia has at its disposal the single largest nuclear arsenal in the world, with approximately 6,000 total warheads. For the sake of comparison, the United States has only around 4,000 warheads, and of all the nuclear weapons in the world combined, Russia owns nearly half of them. Of critical importance to understand, however, these 6,000 warheads can be divided into 2 different
Winter War II electric boogaloo.
categories: strategic arms and tactical arms. Strategic nuclear arms are the big, scary ICBMs that you usually think about from the movies that fly on top of a missile fired from a silo or a submarine that are powerful enough to destroy an entire city. The point of strategic nuclear weapons like these, though, is to never actually use them. They're only there for deterrence, to dissuade the enemy from ever being tempted into using.
But what's the thing? They can use them and probably... Listen, I don't think any country, even China, would really use them other than Russia, you know, because like we said before, Vladimir Putin is fucking insane and you can't set up a no-fly zone because that's going to be basically a declaration of war.
Theirs, and thus they guarantee mutually assured destruction if one side ever deploys them. From the perspective of the Kremlin, however, tactical nuclear arms are viewed very differently. These are significantly less powerful and destructive nuclear weapons, with only a fraction of the power of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima, that can be fired from artillery, rocket launchers, or even planes onto a battlefield. They are explicitly designed to be used as a more restrained or limited option by an army to meet battlefield objectives, and critically, the Russian military defense doctrine currently approves of their use in the armed forces under certain conditions, like covering a major retreat operation. Out of Russia's total arsenal of 6,000...
If a nuke was fired, then the country hit would have to return fire in kind. Yeah, you're 100% right. And if it were to hit NATO or a NATO ally, it's over. You know, it really is over. we're fucked.
Nuclear warheads. It's believed that around 2,000 of them are these kinds of smaller tactical nukes. And the centerpiece of this Russian strategy of battlefield nuclear deterrence is the Iskander-M, a mobile missile launcher that can fire either conventional or tactical nuclear warheads at a range of roughly 500 kilometers. And prior to the invasion of Ukraine, satellite images revealed these exact Iskander missile batteries deployed by Russia inside of Belarus with unknown payloads, but with the range to strike nearly every major target inside of Ukraine. This doomsday arsenal must be taken into consideration when deciding on a no-fly zone
Finland
over
doesn't
Ukraine,
have nukes.
because sending in NATO and American jets to
But at the end of the day, Finland is a NATO ally. It's part of the European Union. So
shoot down
it'd
Russian
be really
planes
dangerous.
who violate the no-fly zone would only really be the beginning of the operation. In order to keep their own planes safe, a no-fly zone would also likely entail NATO airstrikes on Russian air defense and support targets down on the ground, like airfields, surface-to-air missile or SAM batteries, and radar facilities. However, not all of these targets would be limited to the ground within Ukraine. Some of Russia's more advanced SAM batteries, like the S-400, have a range of 400 kilometers, meaning that they could cover wide swaths of Ukrainian airspace from behind the borders inside of Russia or Belarus. Neutralizing them would necessitate bombing targets on the ground inside of Russia or Belarus.
And again, that's a pretty obvious declaration of war. You're literally bombing Russia, so
itself.
That's not going to happen.
Thus, it shouldn't really come as any surprise then that Putin has stated that any attempt by the United States.
Speaking of nukes, Wendover made a new video about a virus which destroyed Iranian uranium centrifuges years ago. Might want to check it out on a future stream. Oh yeah, for sure, man.
Or NATO
Most
to
definitely.
impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine would be effectively treated as the United States and NATO directly entering the conflict. Ordering a no-fly zone over Ukraine will therefore dramatically escalate the chances of a hot war between Russia and Belarus on one side and the United States and NATO on the other. And when you consider that NATO vastly overpowers Russia in nearly every single category of military capabilities except for nuclear, it's not inconceivable that if the Kremlin felt they were being backed too far into a corner, they might choose to authorize a smaller scale tactical nuclear strike somewhere in a last-ditch effort to turn the tide. And it's impossible to predict how things could hypothetically escalate from there. But it's not just the enormous risk of escalation towards a third world war in Europe that makes the no-fly zone unfeasible. Even if one were to be declared, it's unclear
how. The way I want to go out is by riding on a nuke, waving a cowboy hat like I'm in the movie Doctor Strangelove. I mean, that would be a good way to go, man. I mean, if we're all gonna go, we might as well go how we want. Do you think Eastern Europe would get nukes if they were not part of NATO? I don't think they would get nukes because when you're sandwiched between two superpowers, either one of them are not going to allow it. Plus, I think there's a bunch of international treaties that prevent every country to just get nukes, so it'd be like a complicated process. But nowadays, everything's possible, you know? Now Germany has the third best funded army in the world. 5 years ago, or 2 years ago, that was unthinkable.
How helpful it would actually be. Many of the Russian airstrikes that have hit targets across Ukraine have been missiles fired from planes flying within Russian airspace that never left or entered Ukrainian airspace, which a no-fly zone over Ukraine would not protect against. And that's besides the point that the overwhelming, vast majority of the damage that the Russian military has been inflicting on Ukraine has come from ground-based artillery and missile attacks, which, again, a no-fly zone on its own would not be designed to prevent. Back in the 1990s when NATO...
I guess what he's trying to say is that the no-fly zone is pretty much of little help for Ukraine. It would risk an escalation of the conflict with Russia, and it wouldn't really change the situation of the war that much. So,
NATO imposed a no-fly zone over Bosnia.
I understand.
It initially did very little to prevent Serb forces on the ground from carrying out highly destructive artillery strikes, and thus, a frustrated and pressured NATO gradually expanded the scope of their aerial operation towards bombing Serb targets on the ground. This exact situation could end up playing out in Ukraine as well, against ground-based Russian artillery and missile systems, and thus NATO could find itself dangerously expanding the scope of the operation very quickly. And finally, unlike the Serbs or Saddam or Gaddafi, the Russians also possess a very capable and powerful navy with highly capable long-range strike abilities. Back in 2015, a flotilla of Russian warships operating within the Caspian Sea fired 26 cruise missiles towards Islamic State targets across Syria, more than 1,000 kilometers away. Hypothetically, these same ships operating within either the Caspian or the Black Sea could initiate cruise missile strikes into Ukraine from hundreds of kilometers outside of the boundaries of any hypothetical no-fly zone, which could lead to a situation where, once again, NATO may have to consider attacking Russian naval assets outside of the parameters of the no-fly zone in order to fully prevent attacks coming from the sky.
And that's not going to happen. I mean, being completely real. I don't think Russia would have even attempted an invasion of Ukraine had the Ukrainians not given up their nukes. True, I'm 100% with you on that one. But because they give them up, you know, they don't have that option anymore, that lethal option. So they can do whatever they want with Ukraine. Wendover misses the fact that the Serbs were genociding the Bosnians. Ooh.
Escalating to the brink of nuclear war. So, with all of this being said, a no-fly zone over Ukraine would offer only limited help to Ukrainian forces on the ground, while dramatically increasing the risks of apocalyptic military confrontation between NATO and Russia. And so, that's generally why Biden and the majority of NATO have decided that it simply isn't worth the risk, and are unlikely to change their minds. But there are other potential methods that NATO can employ to help Ukraine defend their skies. Earlier in March, Poland, a NATO ally directly bordering Ukraine, offered to transfer 28 of their older Soviet-era MiG fighter jets to the United States and Germany, who would then hopefully transfer them over to the Ukrainian Air Force and replenish the Polish Air Force with a set of newer F-16 fighter jets. However, this too is something that the United States eventually declined to do, out of fear of risking further escalation with Moscow. But there are other things that America has done to support the Ukrainian war effort a bit more indirectly. Following President Zelensky's emotional speech to the United States Congress, Washington announced a further $800 million security package for Ukraine, which will further add to the plentiful anti-air and anti-tank weapons that have already been provided, including around 800 Stinger shoulder-fired anti-air launchers. Simultaneously, Turkey, another NATO ally, has already sold several dozen of their very capable aerial drones to the Ukrainian military as well, regardless of what kind of help is given by the...
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of countries are really helping out Ukraine, and I think that's perfect. But gosh, I just feel so bad about this thing. I don't know how it can be solved with all sides happy, though. But it's definitely Russia's fault, 100%. The West also wanted Ukraine to get rid of the nukes because they were untrusted as a potential Russian puppet. Real Life Lore did a video on the Chechen wars on Nebula. I actually watched it, and it was pretty cool. If you guys have Nebula, I recommend that you watch that video because it's really nice. Not to mention that they were super expensive. More like it just didn't come up as particularly relevant. I'm sure Wendover knew why it happened. He'd cover... Okay, so we're talking about the Wendover. Unfortunately, yeah.
The governments
just
of
complicated
NATO,
stuff,
the civilians and children that are there on the ground and suffering right now are in dire, absolute need of some kind of help from someone. It's estimated that there are at least 7.5 million Ukrainian children who are now in grave danger of physical harm, severe emotional trauma, and displacement. And while NATO will not be ordering a no-fly zone for all of the reasons that I just covered, there's a lot that everyday people like you and I can still do to help right now. This video has a fundraiser attached to it going towards Save the Children Ukraine, who have been in the area ever since 2014 when Russia first invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. They have the highest rating of 4 out of 4 stars on Charity Navigator, and they're there on the ground near the Ukrainian border right now, providing civilians and children with life-saving assistance as they flee the horrific violence happening all around them. I will be personally matching all of the donations made to this charity up to $10,000, including every cent of AdSense that this video generates. And even if you don't have any spare money that you can afford to give, there's still something that you can do as well to help for free by visiting this video's sponsor, Tab for a Cause, and installing their browser extension, Tab for Ukraine, which also supports the same charity, Save the Children Ukraine. The extension will show small ads on the bottom of your new tab page that are paid by advertisers, and then the money that is generated from those ads will go towards Save the Children Ukraine. It's that simple, and to prove they're legit, their website is completely open source and they publish quarterly financial reports showing exactly where all of the money goes. So far, they've raised more than $1.3 million for Worthy.
Yeah, well, if you guys can check any of this, I'll definitely might be installing this extension on my browser, you know, maybe donating some money. And if you guys can do this, if it's within your possibilities, that'd be pretty cool. And I'm sure it'd be well spent on the children of Ukraine, which, gosh, man, they're just stuck in this horrible situation. Do you know why Europeans seem to be obsessed with war? I have a theory about it being about Roman legacies, but yeah, no real idea. Phew, interesting theory, but I don't know. I really have no idea. It's sort of like the people that say, and with accuracy, that the late German militarism that we saw in World War II came from the legacy of Prussian militarism. So it's true, you know, it might have some ground, but it's... I have no clue, man. Everyone is obsessed with war. It's human nature, probably. What do you think there we would be if we spent 3.1 trillion not on military but on space programs? Probably a lot more developed when it comes to space technology, but I don't think we would be that far, you know? But yeah, we spend a lot of money. Just the US alone, like what, $600 billion on their military? It's insane, man. Poof. Well, to end up not so much on a sad note, we're gonna watch Oversimplified's video on the war that changed the English language, part of his mini war series. I haven't watched this one. I think it's gonna be pretty cool, and it has a lot of views. It's been released like 4 years ago, so hey, you know. And if you can check my Skillshare links, I always appreciate your support.
This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning community with over
17,000 classes
in just about
it's time for Oversimplified.
Keep watching until the end of the video to learn how
and I'm excited because I haven't watched this one, so I don't know what's going to come up.
In the Middle Ages, the sun is shining, the birds are singing, the children are playing in the village square.
Sounds like a nice place.
What a wonderful time to be alive. Hey, you're dying of dysentery.
Oh.
And also are being raided by Vikings.
Oh.
What an awful time to be alive. It's the year 900. Europe is a Viking's wet dream. Raids galore. Hey, you want to go raid Paris? Okay. That particular raid didn't go too well, but the King of the Franks said, you guys are pretty tough and scary. How about we give you land in northern France, and in return,
Normandy?
you protect us from other Vikings? And it was agreed. The Vikings set up the Duchy of Normandy, and then they went full-on French, converting to Christianity, learning the language, and making babies with the locals. England also had its fair share of Viking problems. In the 800s, Danish Vikings had conquered most of the country, but the Anglo-Saxons eventually managed to kick them out, although they left behind a bunch of Viking settlers. Now this guy's king. He sucks. Replace him with his brother. And he was like, hey baby,
Edgar,
how you doing?
the
And had
peaceful.
a son, and then turned around and was like, hey baby, how you doing? And had another son. And then he died and no one was sure which son to make king. This one, because he's older. Not if I have anything to do with it. That works for us too. Then he grew up and married the Duke of Normandy's daughter. And had
So
a bunch of
yeah,
kids.
what's the name? Athelred the Unready. Think about that nickname, the Unready. Whew. I mean, it's just always so complicated. Oh. Where's my... Oh, there it is.
This one, he's important. Then his advisors came to him and said, hey man, all those Viking settlers that are living here, they might band together and kill you. Well then, why don't we kill them first?
Hoping every time I see 1066, lol.
And so it was. This pissed off the Danish king, who launched an invasion, and the Vikings conquered England once again. Then the Anglo-Saxons unconquered it, then the Vikings reconquered it. The king's family had to go into exile, including Edward. Remember him? He went to Normandy where he lived for 30 years. He and his brother Alfred tried to return to England to retake the throne from the Vikings, but they were betrayed by the Earl of Wessex, who said, "Hey friend, I'll take you to London where all the nobles are waiting to make you king. Oh no, look out, red hot poker in the eyes. I can't see. And thus you can't be king." Edward then escaped back to Normandy. After a few more Viking kings came and went, one finally died without an heir, and Edward was called back to England where he became king. And that's where our story begins.
Battle of the Hastings, 1066. Okay, so a little complicated backstory, but I'm sure we'll understand more of it.
Here's the thing.
Basically, the Vikings are in control of England. A bunch of Vikings are located in Normandy, or at least Viking descendants.
Becoming a king in the Middle Ages. Often your entire country won't support you at first. You can be vulnerable to rebellions, and it's up to you to take control. Fortunately for Edward, there was already a super powerful guy who had a lot of control over England, and if Edward could get his support, then England would be his. Who is this guy? Oh, piss, it's the guy who gave my brother the red-hot poker in the eyes. After an awkward moment where Edward exiled
the Earl
Godwin
of
from
Wessex,
the country, he eventually had to give in and let him keep his earldom, possibly after Godwin gave him a bunch of gold and said he was very, very sorry. King Edward also
sorry about killing your bro.
Then Godwin died, and his massive fortune was passed down to his sons, who all became earls. In particular, this one became the new Earl of Wessex. Harold Godwinson was now King Edward's brother-in-law. He was a close advisor to the king, a brave warrior who had proven himself in battle against the Welsh, and in many ways he was almost like a co-king. Uh-oh, Edward got old and he's on his deathbed. Possibly for religious reasons, or maybe because he wasn't happy about having to marry her, he didn't boink his wife, and as a result has no kids, meaning there's no obvious heir to the throne, meaning I'm gonna be king.
Oh man, the politics of the old ages, you know? Hey.
He does have a grandnephew.
That's the problems of a king.
No, let's go with me. Just one problem. I mentioned that Edward's mother was a Norman. Edward grew up in Normandy, and he had a lot of Norman friends. The current Duke of Normandy was William the Bastard. Why was he called the Bastard?
Because
one day his father was sneaking out of his castle when his advisors said, "Where are you going?" To the tanner's shop? Why? To get a... Tan. But that was a lie. Firstly, because tanners give you leather, not tans. And secondly, because he was really going to see... That was a lie. Firstly, because tanners give you...
Jersey Shore gang.
You leather,
Italian
not tans,
widows,
and
baby.
Secondly, because he was really going to see the tanner's daughter. One thing leads to another, and out comes baby William, born out of wedlock.
A bastard.
Thus, an absolute bastard. His father died when William was 7 or 8, and he became the new Duke. He spent most of his childhood narrowly avoiding assassination, which probably turned him into the big balls tough guy he's remembered as today. In 1051, the town of Alençon tried to rebel against him, and the townspeople beat on dead animal skins as an insult to his commoner mother. William was furious, and he responded by, well, let's just
say... What a freaking insult. Fun fact, William the Conqueror's son Henry married Margaret, who was the granddaughter of the last king of the House of Wessex. That's how the current royal family are related to Alfred the Great. Pretty incredibly interesting fact.
It wasn't pretty. That's the kind of guy we're dealing with here.
Big,
William
bold,
and Edward were
tough
good
guys.
friends, and Edward allegedly promised that William could have the English throne after him. A decade later, Harold Godwinson even visited William and pledged an oath to him over holy relics, promising that William could be the next king of England. Although it's possible Harold only did it because...
Okay, so there's gonna be some problems between these two, between the bastard and the son of the Earl of Wessex, who I guess is also an earl.
So when William heard that the king was on his deathbed, he said, "Hooray, I'm going to be king."
Yeah.
So now you have two extremely powerful men who both think they're about to become the next king. But wait. This guy is the King of Norway. He spent most of his life as a warrior for hire, fighting for whoever would give him the most gold. You name a place, he probably fought.
Okay, so we have a third guy. You know, it's gonna be a king triangle mess.
Poland? Yep. Estonia? Yep. Against pirates in the Mediterranean? Yep.
Wow.
The Holy Lands? Sicily? And Bulgaria? Yep. He got crazy rich off the back of it and was swimming in gold. Then he returned home and became king. One of the previous Norwegian kings had made an agreement with one of England's Viking kings, saying that when that Viking king died, the king of Norway would get the English throne. Hardrada felt that because of this agreement, he was now entitled to the English throne. He was also eager to go on one last big conquest that would turn him into a legend. So when he got word that Edward was on his deathbed, he thought, I'm going to invade England, and then I'm going to be king. So now we have three extremely powerful men who all think they're about to become the next king of England, and that means somebody's probably about to get hurt. Back in England, Harold Godwinson is watching over the dying King Edward. Suddenly, he comes out with a shocking announcement. Hey,
I'm the
everyone,
king.
Gather in. That's it. Come closer. Don't be shy. Okay, so I've got bad news. The king is dead. I know, very sad. But good news. He said that I should be the next king.
Oh,
so,
man.
Hooray for me. And, oh yeah, he said that if he once told anyone else they could be king, that he doesn't like them anymore, and they should just stay in Normandy. And also he said that no one should ask any further questions.
Or
Okay,
Norway, you know.
Go do whatever it is you do. Usually it took months of preparation to crown a new king, but Harold rushed it, and he had himself crowned the same day King Edward was buried. In Normandy, William's advisors came to him and said, "Hey, Big
that's
Willie,
a dirty move. I mean, it's a good move, but it's also a dirty one.
Harold Godwinson has taken the English throne." And William was furious, so he sent an envoy to Harold who said, "William says you stole the throne and demands you immediately return it to him." Let me think about that.
No.
No. He said no. That bastard. Wait, I thought you were the bastard. Dude. Uncool. William immediately
thought
began
you
gathering
were
his
the
armies together
bastard.
and preparing for an invasion of England. Now, killing a king was generally frowned upon in old-timey Europe because they were considered to have been chosen by God himself. So back in Normandy, William had to get God on his
battle
side. He needed the
royale.
Pope's blessing for his conquest. So he went to the Pope and said, "Godwinson made an oath to me over holy relics, and then he usurped the throne."
Every time that the Pope is on a video, he's always counting money, which is interesting. We saw the video of Henry VIII where the Pope was also counting money. Have you watched Drew Darnell? No, I couldn't watch Drew Darnell today. But hopefully on the next stream we'll watch him.
Can I kill him?
Sure.
Yeah, sure, why not? So the Pope gave William his blessing, meaning William now had God on his side. Everything was ready to go. Just one problem. The wind. It was blowing the wrong way, and William had to wait with his army in Normandy, while Godwinson waited with his army in the south of England. They waited, and waited,
until the wind.
And waited, and then William said screw it and sailed for England and got shipwrecked because the wind was blowing the wrong way. So then he decided to keep on waiting. They waited for 2 months and the wind never changed. Eventually Godwinson got bored and also ran out of food for his soldiers. So he sent them all home and he returned to London. The south coast was undefended and all William could do was keep waiting. While the northerly wind kept William in Normandy, it was carrying Hardrada and his Viking army to England.
Shoot.
Hardrada landed near the old Viking city of York and defeated a regional army led by the northern earls, and York surrendered. When Godwinson heard about this, he must have been pretty upset. He had just disbanded his army, and now he had to gather them all together again and march all the way
Wait, come
north.
back.
He made the exhausting journey in just 4 days, which is crazy quick, and he caught the Vikings off guard and unprepared.
So you're crossing almost all the length of England in 4 days, back in the day, all by foot, plus I imagine carrying a bunch of supplies. Tough. Gotta love popes. If you've seen Salmonella content, you know. I don't think I have. I mean, I've watched Salmonella videos, but I don't think I have watched the one on the Pope.
The two armies stood on either side of the River Derwent. Legend says that a berserker Viking single-handedly held the only bridge crossing the river, dodging arrows and fending off attackers, until some English soldiers got under the bridge in a barrel and gave him the old spear in the jewels. This gave the Vikings enough time to form a shield wall, but because they'd been caught off guard, many weren't wearing their chainmail and armor, and the English eventually defeated them, killing Hardrada, and with him, bringing the Viking era in England to an end.
Okay, so 1 out, I guess 1 to go. Oh, let me guess. Let me have a guess at what's going to happen. The wind is going to blow the correct way across the channel. He's going to land on England, the bastard. And the exhausted army is going to have to go all the way down to, I guess, South England. Yeah.
Finally. William's fleet of over 700 ships and 14,000 men set sail and landed on the English coast at Pevensey and set up camp near Hastings. And Harold was still all the way in York. His exhausted army had to march all the way south just days after their battle with the Vikings. Harold made it to London and considered just staying there and waiting for William to come to him. But William forced Harold's hand by burning down a bunch of villages.
What a
Harold's
bastard,
army set
man.
out and met William's on the 14th of October, 1066. And both sides prepared themselves for the Battle of Hastings. The English were on a hill, so they decided to stay there because it was a good defensive position. The Normans approached, and the two sides probably spent a while yelling at each other. William and the Normans had a few tactical advantages over the English. The first were the archers. The Normans sent volley after volley of arrows at the English, who formed a shield wall in defense. Then William sent his infantry up the hill. The English threw anything they had at them, and the Normans couldn't break through the shield wall. Then the Normans' next tactical advantage came into play. William sent his cavalry up the hill, but but even they struggled to break through the shield wall defenses. Wave after wave of infantry and cavalry came, and Harold knew all he had to do was let the Normans exhaust themselves and he would win. But then something a bit strange happened. It's possible the Normans incorrectly believed William had been killed. Maybe they lost their will to fight against the shield wall, or maybe it was an intentional deception tactic. But suddenly, the Norman forces turned and ran away from the English. Believing they had won, the English broke their shield wall and chased down the retreating Normans, who then turned around, encircled the English troops, and cut them down. In the chaotic fighting that followed, Harold Godwinson was killed, the most popular theory being that he took an arrow in the eye. The English were defeated, and William had won. He was no more just a bastard. Now, he was a conqueror.
He was a conqueror. Oh my God.
The English nobles were reluctant to make him king, but
William the Conqueror was a bastard, huh?
Burned down a few more villages, and the nobles eventually gave in and offered him the crown. As he was coronated, the local villagers in Westminster let out a cheer of support, but William thought it was a riot, so he burned down the village. William then had to go on a long and costly campaign of quelling rebellions and burning
conquering
down
England.
all over England to force the people into submission. And England went through a massive transformation under its new Norman rule. English nobles were replaced with Normans. They built castles and grand cathedrals, but one of the most interesting changes occurred within the English language. The Normans brought their dialect of French to England and emerged with Old English in ways we still live with today. First of all, the Normans were obviously the ones in power, so words related to power like government, judge, castle, and crown come from the Normans. Words that are considered posher or more refined are usually the Norman ones. At first, the Anglo-Saxons probably weren't that friendly to the Normans, while the Normans likely weren't that amiable towards the Anglo-Saxons. An Anglo-Saxon might come into a room, but a Norman would enter into a chamber. An Anglo-Saxon might buy themselves a shirt, while a Norman would purchase a blouse. And while that filthy peasant's new shirt may be fair, the Norman blouse is absolutely beautiful. The Normans actually considered some Anglo-Saxon words so crude that I can't even say them on YouTube. But there's more. Ask an Anglo-Saxon what job he does, and he might respond with some low-level trade, such as a baker, a miller, or a shoemaker. But a Norman has a skilled trade, like a painter, a tailor, or a merchant. The Anglo-Saxon farmers working in the fields owned many cows, pigs, and sheep, but once they were served up in a Norman...
Yeah, Old English is a lot more Germanic than modern English. True.
Banquet, they became beef, pork, and mutton. And written English changed too. Since many Anglo-Saxons couldn't write, the written language was romanticized. Your annoying friend that says cool whip might just be speaking an Old English dialect, as the Anglo-Saxons originally wrote it when, where, and what, but the Normans swapped the W and H around, and the long English A vowel sounded more like an O to the Normans, so you can thank them that you live in a home, not a ham. Hey, fun fact about William, the man couldn't read or write, not in French, not in English, not in anything. Well, what if I told you there was a place where you could learn French, English...
Skillshare! Oh my God. Yo, what a great video, honestly. I didn't know this story, I was very ignorant about it, but I'm super glad that I got to watch it. Thank you for the recommendation. Jahira, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I know you put the correct pronunciation, but I was still not able to get it, understand it. But that's on me, that's not on you. But thank you guys so much for watching today's stream. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna be working on new content that some of you guys have recommended on your comments. I'm preparing it, I'm recording it. And I'm going to start, I did a poll, some of you might remember, that I asked you guys, hey, how many streams would you like a week? And the most popular answer was by far 2. So I'm going to be working on another stream for this week, maybe the Napoleon series, or maybe another stream like this one. Haven't really decided yet. It depends on what content comes out within the next few days. But you gotta bet that next stream is gonna be pretty good. So thank you all for being here, and I'll see you on the next stream.